helping students navigate just their career. As part of the career process, some of the things that you're going to prepare yourself for marketing yourself will be a resume or a CV or a cover letter. Sometimes, I mean, all the time, pretty much all the time, you're going to go through the process of interviewing. So I work with folks on interview prep and things like that. We also have resources on the Career Services website that can help you out if you don't have access to me right away. We have resources where you're able to have ways to practice or learn how to put information together to market yourself. I also have discussions with individuals about exploring their career to look more in depth within their career, things that they may want to do, if a person has a creative thought process about their career, things like that. I work with students and alumni on. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to focus on developing a CV and cover letter, and then I'm open to having a discussion centered around anything that you would want regarding preparing yourself for training and things of that nature. But the most important thing that we're going to focus on is developing the CV and the cover letter writing piece. So the information that you're going to see is going to be pretty general, but it's going to be focused a lot more on structure. Structure, I think, is what's more important. Each individual CV and cover letter is different because you guys are marketing yourself different and you have different experiences and things like that. But what I'm going to focus on is a lot about the structure. But if you have questions along the way, feel free to let me know. Let me make sure. Let's do a quick check. Use the chat if you can. Just let me know if you can still hear me because some of you may have your phones on mute, which is great. Just type in the chat and let me know you can still hear me. Great. Okay, so let's begin. So creating an effective CV and cover letter. So for some who have done a CV, great. For those who have not done a CV, this is what this is focused on this slide. Is just talking about the CV and typically how it's used. In the clinical setting, it is used a lot and is often used because of the fact that you will have so much experience that you can add to this document. This document can become long, and long is kind of good if you have really good relevant experience. But typically these are the arenas in which a CV is typically used in academic and research, scientific, international arenas. But like I said, this is a document that can be more than just 2 pages. And it's very informative when it comes to what you're sharing. And like I said, each CV is different. No one CV will be alike because the experiences that you have are different. This is just an image of a CV. Well, the thing that I wanted to show with this image is the structure. So like I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to talk about structure, formatting, because I think that's what's more important, is making sure that the document looks the part. And so what you're going to see here in this particular example is how if I broke this CV down into just sections, you can see that each section heading is similar, all caps, similar font. It's placed in the same place. As far as the dates, how you are listing where you work and your job title, that's consistent. And listing things in bullet points, I find, is very effective for the reader so they can go through the information quickly and more efficiently. So as you look at this, this is just an example of a document that is just formatted very well. Okay, so with your CV, this is your marketing tool. So for you, this is your first impression to showcase your skills and your knowledge and things of that nature. So this is how you're going to market and brand yourself. Before employers, what's important, or site supervisor or clinical training supervisors, things of this nature, they're going to use this document to help screen. They're going to also use this document, which I think is important. It could create the emphasis of the interview. So one of the things that I talk about when it comes to developing a CV when I'm working with the student is how this emphasizes your interview. So you want to know exactly what you're putting in this document because someone can formulate a question for you. And if you are unaware of what you have listed in your CV, that question could stump you, and that won't look really good. So it's important that you're able to understand your story in the document that you're sharing with someone as you market yourself. All right, so a CV like I said, this is a pretty comprehensive document. So there are going to be various sections that you may use to market your skills. This isn't saying that this is the end all be all of sections that you need to include in the document, but what's important is that you're seeing that there are different sections that you can use to highlight your skills. And you can be creative with your titles. And like I said, a lot of that is on an individual basis when I'm working with students or alumni, job seekers just in general. Depending on what information they're wanting to share can determine like the section heading. But this is just an example of structure so you can see that there are many headings that you can incorporate in a CV. All right, so formatting. So this would be the second page of the first example document that I showed you. So as far as formatting, and making sure that this document looks really clean, maintain a 1-inch margin on each side of this document. Microsoft Word does a very good job of helping you to format. Stay away from using the templates. The templates in creating a CV or a resume sometimes can be a little wonky. If you create, it's sort of locked in there in a sense. And usually the user is the only person that knows how to navigate. If you were sending me a document that's in a template, it may be difficult for me to offer advice on it because as I put information in, it just sort of messes up the whole schematics of the document. So I like to just keep a blank page and then use Word to its functionality. So in putting a bullet point, click on the bullet point button versus putting in a symbol of a bullet, for an example. Using bullet points, like I said, it makes it easier for the reader to comb through your information very quickly and more efficiently so they can see what's important. Font size is also something to consider. The size, you don't want to go lower than 10 and you don't want to go higher than 12 as far as what you're using to display your experiences. Now, people may put the header, their name, or the section headings, the different sections, in a larger font sometimes to differentiate from the other parts of the document, but to highlight that it's a header or something. That's cool, but for the most part, you want to stay within the 10 to 12. And then also the 10 to 12 will determine how long or short your document will be. And sometimes I'll advise to increase the font size if it seems as though we're trying to cram things in and I think there needs to be more space to show your information. Sometimes I'll say decrease if it seems as though you have a lot of information that's not too relevant. Let's sort of condense and let's show the condensing of the document by lowering the font. Using simple, easy to read fonts. This is pretty self-explanatory. You want to make it easier for the reader just to be able to read the information. So here's some samples of easy to read fonts. It's pretty universal. And then what you see circled in red is a header. So once you get to page 2, 3, and beyond, you want to place a header. For an example, if someone was printing this document out along with others, and the pages were scrambled everywhere, they'll know that your page 2 goes with your page 1 and so on. So, and a lot of it's just simple formatting, structure things. All right, consistency in your document. So how you display your information. So some people, when it comes to the dates, will put either the full name, June 2015, some people will put just 2015, or the numeric version of the month with the year. So however you begin to list this information, stay consistent throughout the document. Similarly to in your education section, when you're listing your degrees, you can either spell it out or shorten it by putting the initials of the degree, the credential, but just stay consistent. Same with font size and style. You don't want to have, let's say, Times New Roman and then Arial. You want to just keep one and just go throughout the document. If you're going to use like italics for, let's say, the title of your position, then all titles of whatever experience you have should be the same. So that's what's saying what that means by consistency in the document. Listing your information in the CV. So you can have a bunch of different sections, right? You might have teaching experience, for example, that you've done, I don't know, 3 years ago, but you had 3 years of experience, but you did the last time you taught anything was 3 years ago. But let's say you're going after a teaching position. Well, you may want to highlight your teaching position and move it up in your CV. Well, so when you're listing this information under your teaching experience, you want to put in the reverse chronological order, putting your first, well, more recent experience first. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to create a document where I'm putting my more recent experience first. Sometimes it's based on what's more important that you're showcasing, which I'll get to toward the end. But just to give you an example for reverse chronological, you're going to put your most recent first and so on when you're listing your experiences. All right, so now what we're sort of moving into is what I would call just how you're defining your experiences. So now we get a sense of structure and how we want the document to kind of look. So now we're going to sort of get into the nuts and bolts of what's in your document. So, but this is still about structure. So when you're creating effective content, so how you're describing your work experience, you want to start each one of your bullet points with an action verb. So these are just some examples of action verbs that are typically used in, let's say, a clinical setting. So you may work with groups, so you may facilitate groups, right? So you want to begin with maybe facilitate or coordinate, things of that nature when you begin. You don't want to begin with like responsible for or jobs consisted of X, Y, Z. You want to begin with just an action verb. So when the reader is looking at your experiences, they can define the experience through the first initial action. And then that helps in them understanding the skill set that you have in performing that task. So that verb that you use is important. Also, what you'll see is if you're applying for jobs and you look at a job description, in the job description, they'll also put action verbs of a task. This is something where if you ever heard of create your document to be catered to the job, that's how you're sort of catering it to the job. You're using similar language. If they took the time to say, this is how we define our work, and you define your work similarly, for some reason, the reader can look at that and say, you know what, I think I want to bring this person and talk to them because they've seemed to have done the things that we're familiar with doing in our job that we're marketing. So that's something to consider. But as far as creating content, begin with an action verb. All right, this is just a sample chart. As you can see at the top, these are skill sets. So someone with management skills that they use or communication skills or clerical, what have you. Then there's just a list of verbs. This is something that can be found online if you struggled with that. But I am one to believe that if you're applying for a position, see how they're describing it and utilize some of those verbs in describing what you've done, especially if you have similar experience to what you're looking to do. Okay. Also, in creating effective content, you want to consider how you're defining your skill sets, who you're working with. You can look at population. So in clinical settings, one of the things that I find where clinicians, psychologists, therapists, how they where there's difficulty in really defining what they do. A lot of times, most people will put an overview of what they do in a workplace, but they don't necessarily define the task in looking at how effective they are as a psychologist or a clinician based on the population that they serve. So if you serve a specific population and you're using a certain theoretical orientation or a model to work with this population, that is a skill set that, say, if I worked with an adolescent population and use a different model, I have a different skill set than you. But if you define what you actually did, that's more helpful for the reader to understand your level of skill that you have, especially if it relates to a job. So some of the things that look at: age range, a population, theories used, did you work in groups, what's specific about the group, did you do any assessments, what assessment tools did you use, you know, if anything had to do with where you use, what would it be called, data, numeric data that says you increased quantitative data, you want to indicate this information as well, especially if it has to do with some sort of research type of job. So it's important to really define and create effective content. What you see here in the last sort of bullet is an example of if someone was putting a job description, they would list this first one and say, work directly with the primary investigator. Well, this why next to it is something that if I was reviewing this, I would want to know a little bit more. And as a reader, there's probably more that you've done just by working directly with the primary investigator. So the second bullet is someone who answers the question why. And this is something that you want to ask yourself. As you read your bullets, ask yourself why. Why was this important? Because then that'll determine that you're being too vague and you need to add more stuff. So the second one is really explaining what you did working with a primary investigator. And from this example, there are like at least 3 different skill sets that I can say that relate to maybe a different job. Some jobs or organizations or types of opportunities that you have want to know, do you have experience in our environment? So have you worked in hospitals before? Have you worked when it comes to a treatment model and protocols? Well, this person indicated that. Also, have you collaborated, worked with other professionals in the field to determine a treatment plan? Well, this is what all of this is saying, and that is a skill set that is more defined in the second one than in the first one. So I wanted to show that there. Another thing that comes with structure is the verb tense. So it's very simple. For present jobs, put a present tense verb. For past jobs, put a past tense verb. Very simple. Most people, when I'm reviewing resumes, they don't really consider that, but it's just part of the little small structure things that make sense in a document. All right, so now we're going to get into just the sections and structuring just the sections. Okay, so when you're writing your contact information, usually you can list it at the top. Most people list at the top. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle, the left, or the right. That doesn't matter. However you feel as though you want to display your information, that is totally up to you. But what you want in there is your name. Some people will put a home address, but you don't necessarily have to, because in the world we live in now, some people are a little bit more private. They want to be protective of where they live, because this document does go out into the World Wide Web. And so some people don't want to really list that. But you do want to at least list so how they can contact you: phone, an email address. If you have a LinkedIn account, there is a specific URL that'll link someone to your LinkedIn account. If there's information you want to share there professionally about yourself, you can incorporate that in there as well. What you see here in parentheses is just saying with a professional voicemail. So if you know that you're in a process of a search, you want to make sure that you have your voicemail be somewhat professional. I know some people will use the general one, that the computer voice that says you've reached this number. I'm maybe a little old school. I think in a job search, I think it's important that the caller knows that they're reaching the right person. And although it says the number and you have this number on your CV, most people will argue and say, well, the number is on the CV, they're calling the number, it's the right number, it's repeating the number. Great. But I think a nice voicemail that simply says, you've reached the voicemail box of Charles Kelly. I'm sorry, I'm going to tape your call right now. If you could, please leave me a detailed message. I will give you a call right back, or something simple, just doing a job search. I think it adds more of a personal touch, but that's just my opinion. So that's your contact information. Now, this is an optional section. So for those who may have a little bit more experience, and at any point, if somebody has a question, you can type and say, hey, I have a question. If you are on the call and you're unmute yourself and just say, hey, Charles, I have a quick question, I'll stop, and that's fine. So I want to put that out there. So with the summary statement sort of section, this is for someone who has a little bit more experience, right? So some individuals will use this portion to summarize their experience. Using 2 to 3 sentences, they'll define themselves as something. capturing information about what they're competent, capable in, or have some real extensive experience in. And what you'll see here in these examples are just the first sentence is someone calling themselves a counselor or a human resource person. Then they're talking about what they have success in or what experience they have with clients, and then maybe some strengths areas. If it's in assessment, if it's in data collection, if it's in working in a theoretical orientation strongly. So this is an option. But primarily, I always recommend listing this information if you have at least 3 years of experience in something. If you have less than 3 years, I think you can kind of hold off on the summary. You can't really summarize, in my opinion, in my professional opinion. So I think that, if you have 3 years plus, you can start to really summarize that you're really capable to do what you're doing or title yourself as something. So this is something to consider to put in. When you're listing your education in a CV, it's important to list, where you went to school, put the full name. You can put the full name or the initials of your degree. If you have a specialization, a major, minor, what have you, list that information too. I think it's important to list that you're currently in school, and then also indicate when you expect to complete your program. Some people will incorporate putting a title of a dissertation here in this section. You can, or you could put in another section that I'll show you a little later. But you want to list your information. So once again, this is just a structure of what you want to put in. You can format it however you feel that you need to format it, but you want to make sure that you put this information in. Now, GPAs are something that I feel that at this level, unless an organization, a site is very high on GPAs in their decision making, you don't really need to list the GPA. But if you're very proud of where you stand, I recommend that if you have 3.5 or higher, list it. Other than that, unless you're personally just, you tell me, Charles, I just want to list it, it's a 3.4 and I'm happy. I know, Charles, you recommend 3.5, but look, I have a 3.4, I'm happy. List it. I will never tell you no, because this is your document. This is just something that I suggest or recommend. Professional experience. So now we're getting into the experiences that you have. You're going to see these section titles, but once again, like I mentioned, depending on the individual, titles can be different. But to define professional experience, I like to call this sort of an umbrella section heading, because this can include, I have here full and part-time positions. I think this just includes any position that is very relevant. Some people put relevant experience. I like the term professional experience. It just sounds better to me. So professional experience, once again, listing this information here, listing where you worked, your job title, dates, city, state, and then experiences. And you're going to find that this is going to be consistent throughout the rest of this presentation. All right, so leadership and community service, this can be a section heading, or this just includes these bullet points. So volunteer, community service, campus activities, leadership roles. You can create these sections independently and call it volunteer, community service, or campus, or it can be included under leadership and community service experience. Same thing as any other job. You would list the title, where you work, your job title, city, state, and then your experiences. Professional development. So this will be important in your field. So any trainings, workshops, conferences, if you facilitated them yourself, but anything that has to do with your development professionally, I think titling it professional development is important. I think that's a good umbrella statement title. And then underneath you can subtitle it and say, workshops, training workshops, listing where you did it, what was it. If there was a world-renowned presenter, you can list that person, give them credit, list them, and then if you feel as though that this is a very high level training and you wanted to give sort of like a quick one-line summary, you can do that too. Here's a question that I have here. How many years back should you list? Okay, great question. For all of your experiences, I have a rule of thumb when you're listing jobs or experience. It is, and then a CV is different because a CV is based on sections, but the rule of thumb you want to consider is list the first 5 or up to 10 years, whichever one comes first. So, but when it comes to, let's say, professional development, I would say within 3 years, you want to list information. I would say training that was over 3 years old can become obsolete because I'm sure they've changed how they approach something clinically today versus 3 years ago. Or over 3 years ago. So I would say stay in that window of 3 years. But once again, you guys are in a position where you're being trained. So I would say go as far back as 5 to 7 years, because in the position where you guys are at, where you're not done with your degree, everything is important. But once you are done with your degree, you're going to go through so many experiences within these 5-6 years of your training that stuff prior to that will become obsolete and you won't even list it, it'll take it out. But for now, I would say list it. So don't worry about the number of years back. Wait until wait until you have your doctorate and then start to take things away. Okay. If there's any other questions, feel free to put them in there. So professional membership. So I think it's important that you join professional organizations that fit the agenda for you developing professionally. I'm assuming many of you will probably be members of APA, whatever division part of APA. If there are any other organizations locally, state-wise, county-wise, city-wide, or whatever, agenda-wise, but depending on your own personal agenda, types of people you want to work with, join these organizations, list them, because that'll be important for the reader to see how you are developing yourself professionally. Are you working on your profession based on the standards practice that is being taught to you from this recognized organization? That's going to be important. So list this information. If you're active in committees, which I also recommend, this is me on my soapbox now for about 30 seconds. If you join a professional organization, don't just join, be active. If there are committees within the organization, look to join, look to pair yourself up with a mentor in these organizations. The more actively involved and visibly active you are involved in the organizations, the more recognizable you are. That's when you're offered free stuff. That's when you're offered opportunities to learn or privy to information that some of your colleagues may not be. So the more active you are, the better. So don't just join without being active. Get the most out of it as you can. I think that'll be important. And then you'll know if it's important to be active in an organization or not once you become a professional. So just consider that. I think that's 30 seconds. Okay. All right. So honors and awards, that's something that you can list. I think that's important at where you are now, is listing any scholarships, awards that you've received. This is a general way of how you want to list this information. The school, the scholarships, and things of that nature. All right. So training experience. So you're going to start to build up your clinical training experience over the number of years. So this can be under clinical training experience. You can call it clinical training experience, or you can call it training experience, or this can fall under your professional experience, however you would want to highlight it. But I want to show you this option. So listing where you work, your title, dates, and once again, your descriptions. Okay, same with teaching experience. So if you taught, co-taught, assisted with anything, you would list it as teaching experience, where you did it, your title, and your descriptions. All right, same with research. This could be a section where you may include your dissertation information. So you might include a little bit more of the core stuff that you did as far as the research, really breaking it down in detail, the type of research, data points you use, things of this nature. Or if you were part of a research team in your past, you can list this information too. That can be helpful for you. So same thing, where you did it, job title, job descriptions. All right, publications. So if you authored, you would list this information. But you will want to list this information in an APA format because it is something that's published. So that's something that you can do. Also, you can consider if you're attending conferences or workshops and there were speakers, even the APA manual, there are ways in which you can list attending conferences and things of that nature in a format of an APA style. So that's something to consider too, because this document can be used or has been used in an academic setting, that the more academic the document looks, which APA format is very academic looking standard way of listing information for reference points and things of that nature, you could look to incorporate to make your document more academic using APA style for some of the other experiences that you have. All right, so if you hold a license or credentials, this is another thing that you will want to include in your document. So you can highlight that you hold some credentials or a license of that nature. If you are in a process, let's say you're marketing yourself and you completed the forms of an application and all you have to do is take an exam, you can indicate to a reader that you're in process of receiving with pending an exam or something of that nature. So you can use that as a marketing tool, but you will only use that when you're in the process of actually obtaining that, not when you're thinking about doing the paperwork. Once you've done it and you're in the process of marketing yourself, then you want to list this information. All right, you're going to also list technology and language skills. That's going to be important. What databases you've used, what systems, software that you use is going to be important to the reader, because if they're very data driven and they use a certain program, if you use a program that's similar, that's helpful for them. That's less of time that they need to train you on something. So you want to list this information. And then language skills, fluency level, what type of language, conversation, written, verbal communication, how do you do that? What's your fluency level? I think that's important to list that. And then in this process, you may list your references. So you could do that on a CV. So you would list the references in this manner. These are what is suggested as people you would want to list. And then this is the information that you want to share of the people that you do list. And this can be included in the CV, or depending on the instructions of the site of how to apply, you just want to follow those instructions. But that's something that you could do, is list your references. Another thing, I've received questions of letters of recommendation. Can I list the people who I received letters of recommendation? You can, as you know, for your references. But like I said, you're going to follow the rules of the site. So whatever it is they're looking for you to do, so if you have to submit a CV, a cover letter, for which we're going to talk right after this, letters of recommendations, whatever is included in the packet, that's what you're going to include. So if a site says send it to them electronically, you'll do that. If some say package it all up and mail it to them, you're going to do that. So you know, that's what you're going to do. I keep getting a call, so I apologize for that. So follow the rules is going to be important there. All right, so flow. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier when it came to reverse chronological order. The flow of important to least important is something that you're going to utilize into creating your document. That's from the different sections. What's the more important experiences versus the ones that's not as important. So what's more important will go toward the beginning of your document. What's least important will go toward the back, right? Also, when it comes to you writing your bullet points to describe what you've done, I recommend just write all your bullet points out. And depending on the site, what's important based on, if you have 6 bullets listed, what's important. So whatever is important, that's how you're going to list them in order. That's just pretty much what this slide is saying. Okay, so what to avoid in writing and creating a CV is it doesn't have to be a fancy document, so you don't need clip arts, you don't want to put borders and all that fancy, you don't need to put a logo, things of that nature. Stay away from the templates because I just think that they're hard to work in. Using multiple font styles and styles and font sizes and things of that nature. Keep it consistent. It doesn't have to be longer than it needs to be. So this document can be long, but you don't need it to be longer than it needs to be. If it's something that you will want me to assist you with, that's something that I can do. As I critique looking at your document, I'll say, I think that you said this twice. Because sometimes we write bullets and we might repeat ourselves. And so I may recommend, how about you just combine the thought together into one, or keep this one because this one sounds good and eliminate this one because it's redundant. That's how you're able to shorten it, condense it, make it as long as it needs to be, and not make it too long. And then you don't want to leave marital status, birth dates, and things of that nature. Now, if you're applying for government jobs, they do require that you put stuff like your pay salary, your hours that you work, things of that nature. But if you're not, don't worry about that. So any quick questions? Because I'm going to go right into cover letter writing, and I can breeze through that. That'll take me like 10 minutes. So I'm going to see if any questions are going to pop up. Nope. All right. So cover letter writing, the fun part. Once again, it's a structure. But the way I explain it, hopefully this will make it easy for you, because I don't think this is too daunting, but some of you may think this is kind of tricky, and it can be scary or what have you, or it could be a waste of time, or it's too much time. So the cover letter. Okay, you will write a cover letter catered toward the organization. I recommend right now, if you have a template saved in a file, scrap it. Do not work off a template. Just create a new one all the time. And I'm gonna tell you that as I go through this, creating a new one is easy. It's not hard. All right. So cover letter. This is your introduction. This is, once again, it's a way to market. It's another form of communicating to an employer, right? It is different from a CV. It does not read like a CV. It is a letter to someone. But it's a way also to explain something in more detail that you're unable to do in a CV. Okay. So guidelines. Now, I always focus on a cover letter can be 1 page, but this is the thing. In you guys' plight journey, there are going to be different levels of cover letters that you're writing. In cover letter writing, sometimes it can be called like a writing sample, right? They may give you instructions on key areas they would like for you to discuss. Now, for those, that will be long, right? But in general, a cover letter should be just 1 page. Now, it could go to 2, but after I focus on these sections that I'm going to talk to you about, if it goes to 2, that's fine, as long as you cover these core areas. And then when you're formatting your cover letter, the way that you want to format it, and I never really do good is I should have put like an example. But what's important when you're doing a cover letter in the format? So imagine your header on your CV. Whatever that is, however you list it, in the middle, left, right, however you do it, copy that and paste it into a brand new document, a blank document. That is what goes on top, right? Because that's what makes the documents match. That goes on top. Imagine on the left side, as you're typing in, you want to put the date, and then tab down once or enter, put the date, enter and put another space, and then this is where you're going to put the information of who you're writing the letter to. So if it's John Doe, who is the site supervisor at ABC Clinical Centers, address, and then zip code, and then underneath that you'll put Dear John Doe, comma, and then start writing your letter. So it's almost like a memo style. I have an example on a website, on a career services website. My sample is not a template. It is an instructional guideline. So it gives it looks like a cover letter, but it's actually guidelines in each section. So it's a memo style. That's how you want to begin it as far as the structure. So now after that, and you can put dear, and what this says here at the very bottom is dear hiring manager. That's if you don't have a, if you don't have a name for a person, which I believe most likely you guys probably will, but if you don't, you can put something like, in general, like dear clinical supervisor, dear training supervisor, whatever would be general for that, you would put that in there. All right, so basic construction of this. So when you're preparing to write this, one of the things that you want to do is you want to read the job description. It's important. Read the job description. Start to highlight what you think seems to be the most important task in the job description. So start to highlight that stuff. All right, then you're going to look at your CV, and you're going to start to highlight things that seems to match what it is that they're looking for. All right, so now that you have those things highlighted, now you're going to be in the process of being ready to write. So you're going to keep your letter focused on that job. And that's how writing a new letter is so important. It can take some time, but I mean, I think it's important to write a new letter each time. And then I'll tell you the trick about how you can create a template, but not really. But I'll share that with you. All right, so your opening paragraph. So I like to talk about 3 paragraphs or 3 sections when you're writing your letter. So opening paragraph, ask yourself, why am I writing you? Okay, so to keep this very simple, in the first paragraph, you should have 3 core areas, all right? First sentence should be, what is the name of the position you're applying to at what company, right? Because what usually happens when folks are doing these templates, they're plugging in stuff so quickly that they make the mistake of writing to an organization, the right title but wrong organization, or wrong organization, right title, reverse. Yeah, that. They tend to make that common error. So get into a habit of saying, I'm applying to this position at this company. You're letting the reader instantly know what position and at the right company. Second sentence should be something about you. So I am currently a 2nd year clinical psych student with an emphasis in this area with a theoretical orientation of this as it relates to the site. Remember, you're writing this so the site can be attracted to you to interview you. So you're saying something about you as a current student, what you're studying, what you're interested in as it relates to the organization. So third thing, why are you interested in the organization? Why are you interested in that department, that population, that site? That all is a part of the first paragraph. So however this first paragraph length needs to be, you need to hit those 3 markers. What position you applying to for what company, something about you instantly, because you're introducing yourself to someone. And the third thing is, why are you interested in them? That's the first thing that they should read when they're reading a letter, right? Unless they give you guidelines on what to write on and you follow those instructions. So that's the first sort of paragraph. This is an example of that sort of meaning. I'm writing for this position. I'm currently this type of student, and I have this, and this is my ambition to work in this community mental health with children and things of that nature. Now, you can include more stuff here because, like I said, you're going to highlight job descriptions and your experiences. So you might include some more stuff in this opening paragraph. But as long as you hit those 3 things, you're fine. All right. Second paragraph, we'll call it the meat and potatoes. That's really why you highlighted the job description and what you've done. Because what you're going to do when you write this paragraph is only what are they looking for and what have you done, and make it match. And you're right, and to them, it's meaningful because they're not reading experiences that has nothing to do with the job. And that's the important logic behind it. I'm writing my experiences as it relates to the job. It helps to keep the letter concise. It stops from overwriting because you don't need to include things that they don't need to know. You might have had a great experience studying abroad, doing some stuff. That has nothing to do with the job. So if it has nothing to do with the job, although it was a great experience, that is what's considered an interview talking point, because you had this great experience, which could have been a part of your story on why you're doing what you do. But talk about that when you're face to face with someone in an interview, not in a letter, because a letter should be focused on, this is what we're asking for, this is what I'm doing, and I'm putting it together. So if they ask for heavy group training experience and you have some experience, you're going to talk about that primarily in the letter. Okay, so that's what this is saying. Take the job description, your experiences, create your sentences, and that's your second paragraph. All right. All right, and this is sort of an example of that here. All right, and then the closing paragraph, and then I'm gonna sum everything up. Closing paragraph is the easiest one of all. All you're saying is thank you for your time and consideration. Some people will reiterate their interest in the first sentence in their closing. They may say, I really think this is a good fit and this is why. Thank you for your time and consideration. I look forward to scheduling an interview with you. Here, I've included my CV along with letters of references for your review. Please feel free to call me at this number. Sincerely. And this is an example of that. Okay. But the reason why I think this is an effective way to explain cover letter writings, it makes it easier for the writer to think, oh, I don't have to overthink this thing. They're giving me what they're asking for. I have this experience. I'm only going to focus on that. If you have to expand on this core experience based on this job, then expand on that. You don't have to include other things. And so in the beginning, I said the cover letter shouldn't read like a CV. And when you're writing a cover letter, and let's say in a CV you have job 1, I worked at ABC and this is what I did. Job 2, I worked at XYZ, I did this. Job 3, I worked at 1, 2, 3 and did this. In your cover letter writing, when it matches this, which is a no-no, you're going to say, well, while working at ABC, I was doing these things. In addition, I want to tell you about the things I did at XYZ. And then lastly, I did this at 1, 2, 3. That's creating a CV or a resume in a letter. You don't do that. What you would do is you would simply say, if you had 3 experiences at these 3 companies, you may say, while at ABC, these are some of the things that I was doing. In addition, I have experiences where I worked with this type of population, which could be a part of XYZ, but it's not flowing like your resume. You're just writing saying that you have these experiences. You may mention one of the companies, but you don't have to mention all of them. You just mention the experience and they will see where you did it. But in the paragraph, it'll just read like a flowing paragraph of these experiences that you have. You just so happen to name drop once, listing the name of the company. Some people don't even name drop at all. They just simply say, here are my experiences and this is what I've done. And one of the important things to do is if you list a point, give an example of what you mean by that. So if you said, I manage 15 people, don't just say that. Say I manage 15 people and then talk about what you did in managing 15 people. That stops you from being too vague. And when I'm reviewing these documents, those are the things that I point out and I look for. So I may ask you why, or why do you think this is important to list this in my reviews? So editing tips, avoid starting every sentence with a personal pronoun. Use an active voice, not a passive voice, blah, blah, blah. Pitfalls, I was mentioning earlier, it will read like a resume. You don't want to do that. Look at more of your prime experiences and show that off. You don't necessarily have to just include so much stuff. Just only focus, if a quarter of your letter is I mean, if all of your letter is based on a quarter of your experiences, but all of that is related, that's fine. You don't even have to talk about the other stuff. And so, you know, because that's you writing this letter uniquely for that company. Okay. So tailor the letter to the employer. That's going to be important. The way that the services that I provide in this is I would ask a student or an alum, if there's a position that you're applying to and you want me to review your cover letter, email me the cover letter along with the job description. And that way when I critique, I'm looking to see if you're writing a letter for this job. And then I'll write my messaging for that and then send it back to you. Okay? So that's the end of sort of covering the CV and cover letter. We have like 9 minutes before it's the top of the hour, or 8 now. So if there are any questions, feel free. You can unmute yourself and feel free to talk. I could stop the recording here and then we can keep your questions totally private, or if you want it you have your questions recorded, I'll keep it going. So what do you guys think? You think I should just stop it here? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right, so any questions?
Just really quick, can we have the recording continue just so that way those students who aren't able to attend, I think some of the questions might be helpful.
Great. Yeah, it's still on. We're still live.
Perfect. Oh, I see the red dot. Thanks.
So any questions? Okay. Okay, so I can tell you, like I said, the things that I see typically with the CV writing, it is just vagueness in the descriptions. Sometimes it's just generally just the formatting. Things are not aligned properly. And then also too, I usually ask questions or I'll suggest sections if I'm reviewing a CV. I'll suggest sections to see if you have those experiences. If you do, then you would include them after you make the changes and send it back. So those are usually things I see in like the CV, like cover letter. Like I said, a lot of times it will be either vague or there may be some information there. As I read the job description and I see information being shared, I may ask the question of, you know, do you think that you need to list this information because it doesn't seem as though they're asking this? What more can you include in here to substitute for taking this out? Or, you know, do you have any questions about it? Or, you know, just to get an understanding of what your take on what you think the employer wants to help advise and move you along in the process. So, so does any of this resonate with you guys in your documents that you currently have? Do you find that this was helpful with explaining this, or what did you learn new or things like that? So any thoughts?
It was very helpful. I do have one question.
Sure.
How quick is the turnaround if I were to get my CV or cover letter reviewed?
Okay. Typically it's within 48 hours.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty quickly. It's not. I don't really take. To full disclosure, I'm the only person in career services here at the entire school.
Oh.
I would say at this point right now, it's not a hot season for CV review, so it could be within minutes of me receiving it. So yeah, if you have anything you want reviewed, email it directly. You can email careerservices@chicagoschool.edu. Like I said, I'm the only person. I have a grad assistant. He's
Okay.
really good at, once it gets there, he forwards it over to me, and then I review it and send it right back. I put notes in. I use track changes in Microsoft Word, so I'll either type in something or I'll put like a bubble, like a note of asking questions. So it's pretty comprehensive as far as my review. If I find that the document is good, the only thing I usually do is I might just format something and then offer that suggestion to you, and then that's it. Because sometimes what you may currently have is good.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Anything else? You guys like the view that I have, my background? Pretty cool. All righty. Well, it doesn't seem like any other questions are coming in. Feel free at any point if you have any questions after this, you can email. I'll type in my email in the chat, but it's basically my first name, which is Charles, my last name, which is Kelley, Kelley, at thechicagoschool.edu is my direct email. So if anything comes up, any questions or what have you, just feel free, let me know. If you want to schedule an appointment, feel free. You can email me directly or email Career Services at Chicago School, and you'll be placed on my calendar, and then we'll talk. All right, so I'm going to stop the recording now. Thank you very much for that.